friend from the Rainbow Homes for that very powerful prayer that brings us to a place where we can engage with our topic today. It's much appreciated. The earth is my home. I promise to take care of it. Now, it's another moment for us, Mary Ward family, to come together to celebrate another milestone in living out the Laudato Si action plan, a journey we started in June 2021. It's a long journey, but it is one sure way to contribute to the care of our common home that Pope Francis has passionately invited us to embrace. We see the need and the urgency and hope that in our little ways, as individuals, as communities, as provinces, and ministries, are finding ways to make the aspirations of Laudato Si action plan come true. Now, last year, during the celebration of the season of creation, we decided that it was good to engage with one theme at a time in order to focus more. We therefore took up the third Laudato Si goal, which is ecological economics. We have had at least 2 meetings with the province JPIC coordinators, and in our assessment, they have been good moments of learning from each other. Today, we focus more on fair trade as a key element in ecological economics. We have very able speakers today, so I will let them tell us more about this. So Adina, please take it from here.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in this beautiful gathering and celebration of our 3rd year of implementing Laudato Si, and for the beautiful prayer we had with the children from the Rainbow Homes. It is my pleasure and honor to present to you our first speaker, Friar Joseph Blay, who is a conventual Franciscan priest who has worked as a general delegate of JPIC for his order from 2016 to 2021, and the co-executive secretary of JPIC for USG-UISG from September 2021 to August 2022. He is a member and secretary of the Franciscans International Board of Directors since 2018, and is currently the guardian of his Franciscan community in Elimina, Ghana. He lectures at St. Peter's Major Seminary, Cape Coast, Ghana, and is a part-time lecturer at the College of Distance Education, University of Cape Coast, Ghana. He holds a PhD in leadership and policy from the Nicaragua University in New York, a master's in global development and social justice from St. John's University, New York, and a licentiate in pedagogy for formation of priests and religious from the Pontifical Salesian University in Rome. So, Father Joseph, welcome. Okay, we can see you now. Welcome to our meeting. The floor is yours.
Okay, can I share?
Yes.
Do you see the screen, please?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to begin, I'm very grateful to Sisters Adina and Pauline. We worked together in Rome not too long ago. So thank you for this invitation. So already I've seen at the Croatia, I'm speaking on my own behalf as somebody who has done research in this area. So not on behalf of the Franciscans International, I'm just a secretary there. So it is not I would like to say that I am very grateful for this encounter. And just to start, I want to affirm that if I use a cell phone, if I use a computer, and if I travel by planes, then I would be a hypocrite to say absolute no to any form of mining. Mining is a very ancient industry. It predates the exodus of Israel from Egypt, because as we know, the Egyptians gave jewelry to the departing Hebrews, which were later collected and melted to make the golden calf. However, mining has not destroyed waters. It has not destroyed arable lands. It has not destroyed forests. And it has not caused congenital malformations, as we find in Ghana and some African countries, until the last decade or two. Mining comprises the extraction of many precious stones and metals. However, in our case for this presentation, I would like to limit myself to gold mining. First of all, these are some statistical facts that we can take note of. Africa produces about 1/4 of the world's gold. So that is 25% of the world gold come from Africa. In 2022, out of the 3,000 tons of gold produced in the year, Africa alone produced 680.3 tons. When we come to Ghana, my country is now Africa's #1 largest gold producer, 6th in the world. Gold is Ghana's first source of foreign income and accounts for almost 50% of foreign income. Again, about 35% of Ghana's gold is produced by artisanal and small-scale gold mining, which is illegal. Nevertheless, there is grave unfairness in the production chain of gold in Ghana and Africa. That is why I have the topic, Fair Trade and Gold, a Ghanaian bias. So I'm giving a presentation with a background from my experience and studies in Ghana. So first of all, let us have just a general purview of what fair trade is. I know one of our presenters is working in the fair trade movement, so he's coming to talk more. But just briefly, considering the rate at which mining is destroying the environment, deteriorating human dignity, its high propensity to aggravate poverty in the long term, and the impotence, the inability of government to clean up the mess, it is high time mining in Ghana was covered by fair trade policies. What does fair trade intend? The intention of fair trade is to mitigate poverty and promote sustainable development. Fair trade gold purports to rid gold of blood and war. It purports to leverage equity among small-scale producers, hired labor, and traders. These are the three stakeholders in small-scale mining. Fair trade also intends to set price floor for small-scale gold producers. It also intends to pay a premium for cooperatives of small-scale gold producers. So when the premium is paid, then they can use it to develop their locality according to their consensus. So fair trade gold started around 2011 and entered Africa in 2017 in Uganda. So to have a deeper concept of fair trade, I found this great scholar, Dr. Nick Spall from South Africa, who gives, for me, the finest definition of fair trade. And his definition gives us 4 criteria by which we can analyze or assess the process of good production in many developing countries, especially Africa and Ghana. So Dr. Spall says, fair trade is your guarantee that a product was traded in a more ethical way, which supports better working conditions, which improves livelihood, and which protects the environment. 4, ethical, working condition, livelihood, and environment. So we first look at the ethical dimension. The ethical dimension should consider the general principles or the laws guiding ethics in every way, especially in research and working with human beings. So when we take, for example, the ethical dimension, there are 3 fundamental principles to be considered. And these are: 1, human dignity; 2, beneficence, that is the benefit coming from that work; and thirdly, justice and equity. So if we are looking at these principles, these ethical principles in the line of mining, especially artisanal mining, then we ask, how does artisanal mining affect the health of people in mining communities, including even their unborn babies? How does it provide securities for the people in terms of job hazards? Here in Ghana, almost every 3 months we can have an average where we have hundreds or tens of people dying, caved in, buried under the grave, under the pits. If we look at also the beneficence, then we ask, are the benefits derived from mining shared with equity? Those who have the legitimate right to the land, how much do they receive? Even the country, how much does it receive? How much go out without even passing through the proper quantification? So again, we look at harms avoided. In beneficence, we are talking about, are we able to reduce harm or avoid certain harms? Certain harms are avoidable. Certain deaths are avoidable. Is that happening in the way that artisanal mining is going on, or even sometimes industrial mining? Or does it reduce the barest minimum? Sometimes there are some harms that cannot be avoided, but the ethics says reduce them to the barest minimum. In terms of justice, let's look at land alienation. Let's look at children's right. Let's look at the community's right to even say no. Sometimes the community is neglected in taking decisions about they themselves. That is what the fair trade is invited to look into. So by Spall's 4 criteria, we have quickly browsed through the gross unfairness in the production of gold. We have already seen the ethical way, but now we want to look at even the better conditions, talking about the better conditions. So in terms of working condition, artisanal small-scale mining is neo-slavery. It's a new way of slavery. I will show you some slides, and you see the pictures in the state in which human beings are working. Then you ask, do they really respect their own dignity, or those who are employing them to work in that condition, do they consider them as human beings at all? During my doctoral research, one miner bluntly told me, Father, we call it in Ghana galamsey, artisanal mining or illegal mining is not a work for human beings. I was waiting, I said, it's not a work for human beings. And yet they were doing it. And that person said, Father, if you are a young man, you shouldn't do this work for more than 10 years. Because those who go beyond 10 years, they will be 30 and you think they are 60 years old. They over-exhaust their body. Sadly, it is neo-slavery perpetrated by Africans to fellow Africans. That is the sad thing about it. Sometimes we talk about the slave trade and we are blaming foreigners who came to buy slaves. But here we are, our own Africans are the one meeting this hard treatment to their fellow Africans. My research has shown that artisanal small-scale mining improves livelihood only in the short term. the local economic boon is short-lived because the industry is not sustainable. Miners devour lands and waters and move to new areas to cause the same harm. Protection of environment, that's the last one he says. So the criterion of protection of environment, I think now it is just a cliche. It has become a normal balance, something that we say normally, that artisanal small-scale mining, or galamsey, as we say it in Ghana, destroys the environment. It's a common knowledge. And sadly, its heavy impact falls on the ecosystem. Think about the aquatic life. Sometimes they say, well, but we have made boreholes for them. Then I ask, do the fish live in the boreholes? Do the crocodiles live in the boreholes? Do the crabs, and all the pebbles that we have, do they live in the boreholes? So when we talk about water bodies, it's not only drinking water, but we are talking about a whole biodiversity that lives also there. Again, we think about even the climate change. We think about food security. So the environmental protection covers many things, because when the environment is damaged, it affects our food security. And again, one village told me, Father, in those days, we the villagers were sending food to those in the urban centers, importing rice from cities, because we have destroyed all our arable lands. So we look at fair trade in this case. Now, let us look at this picture. As look at human beings. These are human beings working. And when you compare this to some of the 17th century, 18th century slavery pictures, this is even worse. So artisanal mining, that's why I say is slavery. It is degradation of human dignity. It is not a work for human beings. Sadly, it is neo-slavery, as I've mentioned, perpetrated by Africans. So the local economic boon, as I mentioned, is just a short-lived one. After devouring this land, they will move to another side. But when you look at the dignity aspect, people are staying here, the water or the muddy pool is full of mercury, and some of them will leave with sores, they'll get diabetes, all sorts of things. And you ask, what is the human? And you see this link. Look at the way this one is dressed. This is our own fellow Ghanaian, dressed neatly in white, when the others, some are not even wearing shirts. Look at him. That is the slave master. It's very sad. Again, we look at the ecosystem destruction. As we said, it destroys the ecosystem. So artisanal mining is total destruction of ecosystem. I mentioned aquatic life, the biodiversity, climate, food insecurity. I've mentioned them. I've mentioned that now it's just not enough to say that it's destroying. It has come to be a common usage that it is destroying. And I would like Adina just to play this just about one minute, I think 1 minute, some few seconds. So listen to this. And this was a research carried out by one of Ghana's famous media houses, telling us what is happening in our own backyard by Ghanaians.
Our tour of the adjoining villages along the tunnel revealed disturbing pictures of direct active mining in the Tunnel River, with residues directed into the tunnel. And if you see in the distance, there's a washing bay sitting at the edge of the tunnel, washing directly into the river. This is purely criminal.
This is going nowhere for you. You're going to make a quick buck. How long is it going to last? But the decimation, the catastrophe that you're leaving behind is shocking.
Thank you. So I continue. So thank you very much, Adina. So just very briefly, but so sad, so pathetic. So in the end, oh, sorry, wait a minute. Let us look at another picture. And here, mining is even intergenerational injustice. The injustice that we are showing or doing to those who are coming after us. There is the abuse of children's rights. There is the assassination of unborn children. This picture is coming from one of Ghana's leading teaching hospitals. And the pathologists have a lot of children being born with deformities. Some have no nose, some have no lips opened, some have eyes closed because of the effect of mercury on the pregnant women. They have no other source of water apart from the water from those rivers contaminated. The water that we show in that short movie, that is a river, it's the second longest river in Ghana, more than 600 kilometers, a big basin, and nobody living along this basin can drink this water. You drink it at your own risk. Where is the fairness in mind? So Pope Francis asks, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing? That is Laudato Si 160. So in conclusion, I would expect fair trade gold to be of immense help to African countries if they could have diplomatic binding on gold producing countries, applying these ethics that now gold coming from Ghana, from Tanzania, from Burkina Faso, are they compatible to these ethics? So fair trade gold Africa could become or come out with a barometer. For example, like the Transparency International, every year they come out and say which countries are more transparent. In Africa, our most transparent country is Botswana. So will fair trade Africa or globally come out a barometer measuring countries that are producing gold fairly by not inflicting on the rights, by not taking people's inalienable rights or their heritage from them. And if that is done, I think that is going to help to improve the production of gold. We need gold, but it has to be produced, I think, ethically. It has to be produced with respect to the people. And then it has to be produced also with the next generation in mind. Otherwise, we are doing great harm to ourselves and to the environment and to the generations ahead. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Father Joseph, thank you very much for this insightful, at the same time, I must say, painful and challenging presentation of the reality on mining in Ghana. We take a couple of seconds to let the information sink in, and if you have any questions or comments on the presentation of Father Joseph, you have a chance now. If not, we can you can postpone, and we have a questions and answers session at the end of the meeting. So 5 minutes now for any fresh comments. Maybe I start. Father Joseph, do you have, I think I saw a lot of references being presented at the end of your presentation in relation to the situation of mining in Ghana. And I was wondering, can we have access to this information? Some of us would like to deepen the information we received from you. Can you, is it public?
Please, yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a public lecture, so you can have access.
Okay, thank you.
I think I sent the slides to Pauline already.
Yes.
Yes.
We will share with the participants. I see there are no questions for the moment, but a lot of gratitude messages for you, Father Joseph. So we will leave for the end of the webinar, for the time we have allocated for the questions and answers. And now we move to our next part of the webinar, to a presentation prepared by our colleagues, our Mary Ward family from Colegio Irlandesas de Leioa from Spain, who kindly share with us their reflection on fair trade and ecological economics. Okay, let's see if it works now. Yeah, as a video, so.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Ainhoa Barnechea y soy la orientadora y pastoralista del Colegio Irlandesas de Leioa, en Vizcaya, en España. Hoy me han ofrecido poder hablaros sobre lo que hacemos en el colegio y que tiene que ver con la economía ecológica y el comercio justo. Primero voy a enseñaros un poquito mi colegio, que está en un entorno rural, aunque cada vez un poquito menos debido al aumento de edificación alrededor, pero todavía disponemos de muchas campas para poder disfrutar de unas vistas espectaculares, como podéis ver aquí. Somos parte de los 8 colegios que están formados en la actualidad en la Fundación Educativa Mary Ward. 2 de ellos están situados en Madrid, 3 de ellos en Sevilla o en sus alrededores, 1 en Badalona, cerquita de Barcelona, y 1 en San Sebastián, en Donostia, muy cerquita de nosotros, que somos los que estamos situados en Leioa, muy cerquita también de Bilbao. La unión de los 6 colegios, de las IBVM y de los 2 colegios de las CJs, es un movimiento más en la línea de unión que nuestras monjas están marcando ya desde hace un tiempo, y esto nos proporciona fuerza y apoyo para poder seguir adelante. Como todos nuestros colegios, seguimos a nuestra fundadora Mary Ward, a Ignacio de Loyola y, como no, a Jesús. El Papa Francisco nos ha invitado a cuidar la casa común, cosa que nosotras ya hacíamos desde el principio de nuestra creación, siguiendo los principios de JPIC. Ahora seguimos caminando en este sendero junto con los ODS, la Agenda 2030, objetivos a más corto plazo para intentar cambiar y mejorar nuestro planeta. Hoy estamos aquí, o estoy aquí, para poder explicaros brevemente qué acciones llevamos a cabo dentro de nuestro colegio relacionados con la economía ecológica y el comercio justo. Y empezaré explicándoos un poquito sobre el huerto. Desde hace ya unos años se prepara en la tierra y se planta junto al alumnado. Esta actividad desarrolla la parte más creativa del alumnado. Se les enseña cómo preparar la tierra, cómo se planta, cuándo y cuánto regarla y a elaborar paciencia, que es lo que hace falta también. Para cuidar la tierra tienes que conocerla. No todo se planta en primavera, no todo florece junto. Conociendo la cultura del esfuerzo, aprenden a valorar el dinero que hay que pagar para conseguir productos de calidad, y esto está muy relacionado con comercio justo. Aquí podéis ver pues, cómo queda el huerto después de un tiempito. Agenda 2030. Un grupo de personas de la comunidad educativa, alumnado, profesorado y personas del colegio se encargan de desarrollar un programa para la sostenibilidad, implicando también a agentes locales, como ayuntamiento y asociaciones varias. Este grupo se encarga de crear y mantener una red de reciclaje dentro del colegio. También preparan actividades transversales para el alumno, como charlas, salidas, formaciones y proyectos varios en todos los niveles del colegio. Buscamos agentes de cambio y gente comprometida con el medio ambiente. Buscamos cambiar para mejorar. Aquí podéis ver algunas fotos de diferentes momentos. También hacemos cambios internos a nivel de estructuras. El cambio de ventanas a unas más eficientes y el cambio de bombillas LED están suponiendo un desembolso importante para nuestro colegio. pero vemos la necesidad de ayudar al medio ambiente de todos los modos posibles. Y concienciar a nuestro alumnado de trasladar estas ideas a sus casas también es importante. La comida. Gracias a una asociación local llamada UNAR, los excedentes de comida diarios se transportan en unos tuppers gigantes y se pueden utilizar para alimentar a gente con pocos recursos. Esta es una forma más de ayudar tanto a nivel económico a esas personas que no tienen la suerte que nosotras tenemos, como al planeta, para no desperdiciar recursos que ya están aquí. La compra de productos locales también se fomenta en la medida de lo posible, aunque siendo un colegio tan grande resulta complicado. Uso de las nuevas tecnologías. Buscamos el reducir el uso del papel. Al utilizar Drive y pedir la entrega de trabajos en formato digital, reducimos la impresión de papel y el uso de impresoras, de modo que disminuimos el talado de los árboles para este uso. El uso de todo digital nos hace ahorrar papel. Tiendas de comercio justo. Aquí se llama Kidenda. Sigue las reglas de la ideología del comercio justo, respetando el medio ambiente, diciendo no al trabajo infantil y con unas buenas condiciones de trabajo, creando oportunidades y con pagos adecuados. Se utiliza alumnado de primero de bachiller de modo voluntario para vender en los recreos bocadillos de chocolate de dicha tienda, a la vez de explicarles por medio de unas tutorías lo que significa un trato digno en el trabajo, la no explotación y distintas situaciones de comercio justo en el mundo. Los productos son más caros de lo que estamos acostumbrados y los sabores no son iguales. Por ejemplo, el chocolate es más amargo y más caro. Resulta complicado hacer entender a los más pequeños las razones para ello. Desgraciadamente, en la pandemia detuvimos nuestra colaboración con Kidenda, aunque no descartamos retomarla en un futuro no muy lejano. El resumen de todo lo dicho anteriormente sería que pequeños cambios locales pueden llevarnos a grandes cambios globales. Muchas gracias por vuestra atención.
Thank you very much, Ainhoa, for this presentation and for everything you do in relation to fair trade in Spain with the students. We move now to our keynote speaker today, Mrs. Rupa Mehta, who is the president of World Fair Trade Organization and the CEO of Sasha Association for Craft Producers, a fair trade social enterprise, and she's also the secretary of Sarva Shanti Ayog, its associate development organization. Sasha provides business support inputs and market access for sustainable livelihoods to artisan groups based largely in rural communities and semi-urban areas. She is on the board of Satna, I hope I pronounce it correctly, the handicraft and income augmentation program of Seva Mandir, Udaipur, the managing trustee of Rural Agro Services Association, a registered trust which develops natural agro-based products, trains producers, and identifies suitable markets. And she's also on the board of All India Artisans and Craftspersons Association. Mrs. Mehta is an MBA from Delhi University with further professional qualifications in social communication. In the earlier part of her professional career, Mrs. Mehta worked in hospitality and merchandising sector, and she was the chief executive officer of a renewed textiles manufacturing and retailing company before joining Sasha and the fair trade movement. Her topic today is fair trade. Welcome, Rupa.
Thank you, Adina. Thank you, everyone, for having me over, and for Pauline, because you both have been communicating with me and sharing. So it is indeed a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Father Joseph Play. It was very interesting to hear your presentation because it gives a context of how how much the reality of the way we do things, eventually it comes down to the way we do things, where, the choices we have made is to extract the maximum. That, we just value success and economic prosperity, and we celebrate the rich, we celebrate fame. We've moved away in the past, and I think that is what the current reality is. And it's not happened overnight. It hasn't happened. So we were sold dreams and myths, and past generations, and it's continued till it hits us between the eyes, when we know that the choices people make, personally, in businesses, with governments, though what we feel today is the impact of that. And given this background, fair trade does offer, fair trade and other sustainable economies, they do offer the light at the end of the tunnel. But it is going to be how much are people going to realize and to commit to it. So I'll move on now, with thoughts that I've put together, and I hope they're comprehensible. So the current global reality of growing poverty, inequities, polarization, conflict, and of course the climate crisis is at least largely due to mindless development and economic growth, which we celebrate in national GDPs, that, these are the richest nations, and the parameter that we pick is GDP. How much wealth is generated in that economy, without considering its social and environmental impacts, and which are so important. Unregulated business policies, processes, and practices. I underline the word unregulated. Practices informed by shareholder and profit primacy, driven by value extraction, have added to the environment devastation and the social disparity. The fair trade business model has demonstrated that it is viable and sustainable. It addresses value issues of social and economic inequities, as well as climate change. The devastating effect of the climate crisis, and we all know this, impacts the most vulnerable and who are the least responsible for the current state. Placing people and planet before profits, fair trade calls for all businesses to transform their systems and join the cause of trade and climate justice. Fair trade began its journey in the 60s, evolving over the decades and increasing its impact on the lives and livelihoods of the most marginalized farmers, craftspeople, artisans, and textile workers, primarily in the South, but more recently through its work with refugees and small-holding farmers in the North. At its core are embedded principles and practices that ensure the wellness of people and planet ahead of profit. It doesn't take away. We have to generate profit. We have to generate surplus, because that surplus then goes into sustaining livelihoods and in protecting the environment and people. So sorry, I lost my connection. Bear with. Okay. Please, okay. Okay. Fair trade began its journey and increasing its impact on the lives and livelihoods of the most marginalized farmers, etc. At its core are embedded principles and practices that ensure the wellness of people and planet ahead of profit, demonstrating a business model which finds its rightful place in the new sustainable economies, which of course is part of the ecological economies we are talking about. So fair trade principles which inform all fair trade social enterprises include creating opportunities. This is important, creating opportunities for disadvantaged producers and paying fair wages, and having no discrimination, gender equity, safe working conditions. Very important, again, is absence of child labor, freedom of association, whatever their ideas are, political or otherwise, there's freedom of association and care for the environment. I know Father Joseph says that we use this care for the environment. Sometimes, it's something we all say, but I think with fair trade, we break it down. We break it down into actually what action can be taken by the business and by the consumers. The fair trade movement today comprises of producers and market enterprises who work with small, underserviced and marginalized communities of artisans, craftspeople, refugees, garment and textile producers, and food producers. Investments are typically low, and simple tools and equipments replace heavy-duty machinery designed for large-scale production. Production is often spread over several units instead of large factories and is aggregated to meet larger demand as orders grow and the business grows. As guaranteed fair trade social enterprises, fair trade values and principles are embedded in fair trade social enterprise production and business practices. Once again, I've already made this point, but just to elaborate, creative manufacturing is at the core of these enterprises who find innovative solutions to their everyday production and marketing challenges. There is flexibility in this production model as it meets a lower or higher market demand without the high cost of wasted capacity. Artisans and producers are skilled or are trained to acquire skills, which allows them to experiment and be open to design and product development, and which is needed to stay relevant in the marketplace. And whenever this skill upgradation or training happens, it also gives the artisan autonomy. They are empowered. They can choose to do business with one market enterprise or with another, or in their local environment, whatever is really working for them. And this design element is also needed to stay relevant, of course, in the marketplace and to give autonomy, as I said. Please excuse me if I'm repeating myself, please. So there are stories of repurposing waste, upcycling and recycling, as there is global concern for the environment, and which also contributes, and I must make this point, positively to the bottom line. When you're recycling, managing waste, we've also seen that it has added to the income of the artisans. One of the biggest challenges to get the attention, and this is an ongoing challenge, of policymakers, even though there are fair trade advocacy organizations, supporters, etc., but to get serious attention and to get policymakers to review and to change their policies, to nurture social businesses that at their core work for the well-being, again, of people and planet, and to regulate businesses to follow principles of transparency and sustainability in their practices. And these are issues, both transparency and sustainability, and which is at the core of fair trade. So now we also find that there is a growing community of consumers, and this has come about really because of the concern for the environment, that question big businesses on the impact of their working policies. Big businesses are but what has happened? We find a scenario where big businesses are promoting their brands, taking token steps and resorting to social and greenwashing to win over conscious consumers. This is also a trend, we all know that. Our challenge is to promote authentic stories of social, economic, and environmental sustainability of fair trade social enterprises and grow their markets and grow their influence. So in the last few years, as I said, I mean, the movement started in the 60s. So in the last few years, many fair trade social enterprises, fair trade networks, and advocacy groups have celebrated milestone anniversaries, marking their relevance in the current reality. However, the task ahead is to grow the movement. We haven't had adequate impact, I think. And we talk about, reaching those SDGs by 2030, and we are already in 2023. So I don't know, I haven't lost hope or faith, but I know that it is going to be a very, very challenging task. So our collaborations, but what is required? What is required to have that larger impact? Not if we work in silos, not if we are not connected. And I mean beyond the fair trade world also. And this is what we talk about. The collaborations which have to grow also with like-minded networks and organizations. And these collaborations need to be deeper and more meaningful. Our voices louder and our narrative much, much stronger. It is time for elders in our movement, with their wisdom and experience, to also join forces with the youth, with their passion, energy, commitment, and agility to bring fresh ideas and strengthen the movement. So the generation next is what we should be nurturing, because a lot of what has happened, we have to take responsibilities for the past, that we were not able to make the kind of impact, that we were not able to create the kind of change, the shifts, even though our work was happening, we were doing our best, there was commitment, there was passion, but there was another trend which far overtakes what we are trying. So once again, so the movement which has to be strengthened is that for fair trade policies, practices, and processes to become the norm for all businesses. And when I talk about fair trade, I talk about social enterprises which are not labeled fair trade, but which follow the same kind of principles, and which are focused on addressing the issues of disparities, of inequities, of social, economic, and environmental inequities. So I close this here. I think it was very moving seeing Father Joseph Blaise video, which he shared with us, because this was just a microcosm of what is the reality in our world. And I hope I've been in the movement for 45 years and I've seen a lot of very positive change, but now there is a sense of urgency. So in conclusion, I would just say, let us all recognize that sense of urgency and the need to collaborate, to link with others, so that your work can be amplified. And only when it's amplified, there is strength in numbers. And then we can, look for the kind of environment, and here I mean social, economic, and environment for future generations. So thank you so much for your patience. And once again, apologies, because I do lose, that when I write something, I do lose the link if I try to elaborate. So bear with me, and thank you. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mehta. Your input very insightful and very helpful for us, to give us some optimism when it comes to how to deal with fair trade. As the video before you showed, children are not so keen on eating chocolate from the fair trade because it's more bitter, or we are not so keen on buying products because they are more expensive than the others. We now take a 1 minute break for our translator and to let's think the information, and then we leave 5 minutes for questions, remarks, or comments before we move to our next speaker? Okay, we have our first question in the chat box. If you can explain a little bit why fair trade goods seem to be more expensive than the mass-produced goods.
Yeah, they are because of, the practices, because of the policy of creating, good working conditions, paying fair wages, and using the most authentic materials, whatever is required, and making sure that the processes don't impact the environment. So when you are addressing all these requirements, all these practices, when you are part of that, then the goods become, obviously the products will be more expensive. And when we see, the cost, the actual cost, somebody talked about the actual cost of large brands, when large brands, popular brands, which have such good marketing, promotional material and marketing strategies, they will make sure that they have policies which attract consumers to buy more and more and more. And they compromise. We know about sweatshops. We know, I mean, just seeing how the in that video. So when you are, the people or the environment is not your concern, then you are just extracting value for your shareholders. And so, but they can also afford to do this because they've saved so much cost. So actually, there was for fast fashion, and I won't get into it because maybe it will be a good idea for whoever has raised that question to look at what the actual cost of fast fashion is and what the actual cost for those modified food products. The actual cost on human health, on even when they are, genetically modified. So when you keep everything pure and you do all the right things, and then products, the actual cost is high. So on that, I'd also say what we tell in fair trade, buy less, but buy quality and buy fair trade, because that's a long-term choice that you're making.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have some questions myself, but I think we move on now to our next speaker, and then during the questions and answers, if nobody has questions, I have a few. Thank you very much, Mrs. Rupa. We move now to our next speaker, and I hand over the facilitation to Pauline.
Okay. Yes, I was muted, so now I'm okay. So I said, okay, thank you, Adina, and thanks to Joseph and to Rupa. At this stage, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Brother Rodrigo de Castro Amede Peret. He is a Franciscan friar with a background in civil engineering and a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy and Theology. He advises the Special Commission on Integral Ecology and Mining of the National Conference of Bishops of Brazil and serves on the Executive Committee for the Inter-Franciscan Service of Justice, Peace, and Ecology of the Conference of the Franciscan Family of Brazil. He's also the Regional Vice Chair for Latin America and the Caribbean in the International Partners in Mission in the US. Brother Rodrigo has 39 years of experience working on land conflicts at Pastoral Land Commission. He is a board member of the Churches and Mining Network and one of the coordinates of the People's Dialogue Network, Latin America, Africa. His intervention is on fair trade and mining with a Latin American perspective. Brother Rodrigo, you're welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. Just want to say I'm very happy with the two presentations. We welcome fair trade and solidarity economy. Of course, I'll be talking specifically about fair trade and mining. I think to delve into the complex relationship between mining and fair trade, we need to consider the broader context of extractive economies and the challenges they present. And then we need to explore geopolitical dynamics of mineral extraction in its impact on global accumulation process, emphasizing the need to consider alternatives, the intensification of resource extraction, including mining, agriculture, industrial fishing, oil and gas, stems from strategic policies adopted by countries or economic blocs to secure the control over raw materials. This exacerbates economic, political, territorial, and environmental asymmetries between the global South and North. Latin America, Africa, and Asia have experienced significant booms and post-booms periods driven by extractive commodities. The governance, this is another issue, of extractive industries involves a symbiotic relationship between the state and the private sector, often with the mining sector holding hegemony and influencing state institutions. International banks and financial institutions play a significant role in financing and technological development, while local communities bear the brunt of this possession. This creates a political architecture that serves the interests of mining sector, generates flexibility on environmental local legislations and human rights, and leads to social environmental injustice. Mining activities have destructive consequences for communities and ecosystems, resulting in land dispossession, water contamination, many other impacts on the environment and violations of human rights. The mining sector consistently disregards the well-being of local populations and prioritizes profit over people and the environment. This reality imposes constant state of risk on mining affected territories. Fair trade emerges as a potential solution to address the negative impacts of mining. It's a question. However, the expansion of fair trade products into continental market carries risks of diluting the movement radical nature and undermining its critique of the dominant economic model. The term fair trade itself has replaced the term alternative trade, raising questions about the alignment with market-based approaches. When it comes to fair trade in mine, terms like fair minerals, green minerals, ethical gold, just gold are often used. By their meanings, but their meanings, they can be questionable and serve as branding devices. These terms do not adequately address the social, cultural, and historical dimension of environmental degradation and crisis. They tend to reduce life and nature to mere economic assets, neglecting the broader socio-ecological interactions. By the other hand, the jewelry industry, among others, seeks to align with fair trade and mining through ESG, the so-called environmental social governance, strategies and narratives of responsible jewelry. However, it's crucial to critically examine these narratives within the contested field of sustainable development and environmental crisis. While fair trade growth initiatives have provided additional income and improved the quality of life of some miners, they have been criticized for benefiting only a few individuals and failing to address the root causes in mining regions of poverty. Moreover, these initiatives often neglect the roles and actions of other actors, such as the state and traders, in perpetuating the problems associated with mining. In conclusion, I think the expansion of fair trade into the mining sector poses significant challenges. It's necessary to question the potential dilution of the fair trade movement and underlying narratives of green capitalism. It's essential to consider alternative approaches that prioritize environmental justice, community empowerment, and sustainable solutions. By demanding a just transition, accountability for harms caused and established, the so-called right to say no, to demand, establish sustainable solutions, demanding accountable for the companies, but also and for the whole region. The right to say no for the affected communities. In Latin America, specifically, lots of affected communities and social movements are challenging the status quo and striving for equitable and sustainable outcomes, struggling for territories free from mining. Just last reflections. According to the research, there is already sufficient amount of gold in circulation to meet global demand for technological and trading purpose. Studies conclude that the negative impacts of mining, such as climate change and local environmental damage, outweigh the benefits. Historically, data suggests that approximately 208 million tons of gold have been mined, and the majority extracted since 1950. Since gold is highly durable, most of it still exists in some form. More than 90% of the gold is mined for luxury and financial markets, leading to the unnecessary generation of 50% of the world hazardous in mining waste tailings. The International Resource Panel is an initiative from the United Nations Environment Program since 2007, aims to enhance global resource utilization through knowledge sharing. Experts from the panel assert that there is currently enough gold stored in vaults and national reserves to fulfill global demand indefinitely without the need of further extraction. I think in order to promote local development through solidarity economy, it's important to incorporate fair trade into productive arrangements and social, environmental, and popular productive organizations. This entails collective organizing solidarity economy initiatives to strengthen local communities. The objective is to enhance the popular economy by fostering a new culture of production, marketing, and consumption. The aim is to establish social, popular, and solidarity-based economy that prioritize human values and is inclusive rather than competitive. And I think at the stage of my reflection, I would like to conclude with a fundamental premise. Financial investments is never morally neutral. It's interesting, in Caritas in Veritate, Pope Benedict XVI, in his Encyclical, remind us that buying is always a moral act and not merely economic. It's important for individuals to be aware of the aspect and consider the ethical implications of their purchasing decisions. Mine and fair trade, it's important to consider in this field the broader context of extractive economies and the challenges. The pictures shown by our presentation from Ghana, Joseph Blair, are the same that you can see in many different areas in Latin America, particularly in the Amazon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brother Rodrigo, for your intervention. We appreciate, and especially the need to put the people ahead of the profits, that people's lives and their livelihoods are more important. So that calls for a challenge to us, I guess, to promote advocacy, maybe to teach the people, to work with the people, to be able to advocate for their own rights. These are very touching issues. Now, I invite us to take just one moment. We give Isabel, our translator, a little break, but also to write our question or comment on the chat for just a minute. Okay, so we've had a short break. Would we have any questions for any of our three speakers? Please let us know. You can use the reaction button or put your question on the chat, and it can be a question or a comment. You have 5 minutes to do this. Welcome. Yes, Rupa? Rupa, you are muted. Okay.
Yeah, I do that very often. So, no, what I wanted to say was that it's such a, in India, buying gold, and that is like a form of investment, because also that's supposed to be the woman's wealth, because the time very often people don't, the sons inherit. It's changing, the laws are changing, but ancestral property, etc. So it's at the time of when the girl child is getting married, or girl woman, the woman, not the child. Though we also have child marriages still in some parts. But when the woman gets married, so this is the gold that's given to her, and that becomes. And I find it incredible that there is such a growing demand, say in my own country, where I don't think people have that kind of disposable income. But it's grown about 12 times the value has multiplied 12 times. So in the last 2 decades, and which is a lot, but still there's no dearth. People are still buying gold. So to your comment, Rodrigo, that that's the way it is. But I don't condone it one bit, because this is something else. There should be other things happening. But anyway, it is not always luxury. It's also an investment for people who don't have that choice. So yeah.
My comment, I think we need to have some figures. Around 7% of the gold purchased globally each year is used for industry, technology, and medicine. The rest winds up in banks' vaults and jewelry shops. But we need to talk about recycling, because the gold is still the same. It's durable. And there are many challenges that we have to face. One is closing gold mines is the first step. There's a huge campaign. A lot of organizations and also funding institutions like DKE in Austria, Miserio, and others are involved in this. And we at Churches and Mining, we discuss a lot in the campaigning on divestments. I think, but we understand it's in some regions of the world, it's a cultural issue, but many regions have grown dependent on gold mining and artisanal mining alone. We know that it supports around 19 million miners and their families worldwide, mostly in developing countries. This is true. But I think these small scales, but with mercury and all these contaminations, etc., these miners deserve a just transition that ensures that they do not become collateral damage in the shift of sustainability. So governments must provide a robust safety net for former gold miners and their families. And that includes offering low-cost training and reskilling to ensure that miners can find employment in more sustainable industries. For countries where the culture is connected to gold, not only as an investment, but makes part, I think there's sufficient gold to be recycled. There is a very interesting paper that was released in May 2015. Mine Peru, Wealth Goes, Poverty Stays, about when the fair trade mining got in Germany. And a lot of, talking about fair gold. And a lot of organizations start to talking about. And one of the issues that are interesting is offering fair gold diverts attention from the larger issue of gold mining. They highlight the unequal economic dynamics of extractivism. And the solutions and the campaign doesn't really, and this was another paper from Switzerland, and the article states that this gold is obtained from small producers under specific environmental and social conditions, and mentions its introduction in several countries, but it claims that while it has helped improve the quality of these families, didn't really provide, let's say, did not address the root causes of poverty in the region. So I think when you talk about fair trade and agroecology, fair trade and food, fair trade in a lot of artisans, and this is more reasonable, this is more understandable, this is a different perspective where we're talking about agriculture as means of life, but not as an activity as means of destruction.
Okay, thank you for the interventions. And I ask a question to Rodrigo. That's very, very nicely. Thanks for making us more alert to the complexity of the situation, even when we go along with fair trade. But however, however can we work when the trend of business is to swallow smaller enterprises? Over to you, Rodrigo.
Yes, I just want to highlight that I am stressing the issue of fair trade in mining, not fair trade as a whole, especially when fair trade is connected to this solidarity economy. We could say, to, like Pope Francis is talking about, the economy of Francis. Here in Latin America, we say Francis and Claire, because we don't want a patriarchal economy anymore. And of course, these are huge, sustainable solutions in the fields. They're the risk of the normal market to get this for their trade, you know. But this is the risk we need to keep doing and strengthen. For me, what's hard, it's how to regulate certification. It's a big issue in this term, because this is most certification is somehow private, the labeling, and it becomes a market in different sectors. The control and how is the countries and the states control. That's why I tried at the beginning to explain the symbiotic relation, especially under mining. It is a strong in Latin America. This is a strong in Africa. The government and the companies are feeding each other, and the hegemony in the sector is the private sector. And I wouldn't say not only because of corruption. Can you imagine when you arrive in one region, in the territory, and you say, I have, I don't know how many millions to invest. You become a partner of the government. This is the first thing. But there's another issue that we need to highlight when we talk about fair trade in mining. It's called a small scale mining, artisanal mining. As time passes, it's less and less artisanal. And the machinery, especially in the Amazon that we see in here, costs millions of dollars. So the big companies are already behind. And unfortunately, because the people is in this situation of poverty, organized crime is intense. There are some research talking this about in Peru, but this is, I'm talking in general, and of course in Latin America. And in the Amazon, just to end, after, of course, we had this Bolsonaro government here and 4 years of disaster, but finally we don't have him anymore, but the consequences are there. In the Amazon, a whole indigenous people, the Yanomami people in the border of Venezuela, was being killed by what? The lack of food, because when you destroy the forest, you destroy the livelihood. And there's a symbiotic relation among the native people and the environment, poison the water, and the arrival, because this gold has to go to somewhere, the organized crime. So I think the main and I think Ropa could explain us much more because she's really involved in this issue. But I would say that when you talk about it's important to emphasize that many workers that are involved in this are trying to reproduce and to survive, to respond to their needs. And then there are about many challenges posed to training, a training process, a formation process. And perhaps the greatest of them is to build a collective understanding of the relationship between the history of marginalization of each of the social beings involved and the process of resistance to overcome this model, that to place them in a different situation, take into consideration the territory and the others who live in the territories and the environment.
Thank you. Thank you. Rupa, would you like to say something about it?
It's a very hard question to answer because especially for my kind of work, I mean, the fair trade movement and with WFTO, it's mainly being with small farm holdings and with artisanal production. But what I see, the challenges, so it's easier, in fact, in the area in which we work, to substitute. Most people will be using hand tools, etc. And also because we have seen that it's easier to make a choice where you introduce certain practices for positive impact. You change or you empower those communities to be able to make those choices. It's easier. Mining is too huge. Mass farm production because, as Rodrigo, you say that, creating that enabling environment, even if I talk about India, which has such a large community of artisans and, hand workers, etc. I don't have to get into that. Even then, from government to government, to nurture these communities. And here there's a whole cultural aspect to it. This is our identity. Even there, you do not get that attention. Because, in a democracy, I dare say it's even more dangerous in some ways because, who supports the elections? It's going to be the big businesses. And you've seen emerging the rich from maybe they have 147th position coming to second or third. And what is happening? We know that very well. So I think I would go along with what Father Joseph says that you can minimize impact because when you dislocate people, especially when it's a generational thing, that it's a skill that is passed on and that is something that they're comfortable in. I think there can be at least that's from my perspective, that there is no real black and white. You cannot, because these become very often easy theoretical solutions when you say that let's transition, let's give them skills, because that is such a long, I think, it's my view. I'm maybe not too radical, but I do feel that ownership changing hands. And of course, with the impact minimizing, making choices that this is not negotiable. You have to stop this, you have to stop this, but this we can work around. So I think that is my view, that is my experience. Like I said, maybe, and we have seen that, consistent advocacy, like in Europe, in European Parliament, they passed a thing that, businesses have to now be totally transparent and, they have a lot of requirements. And which would not serve the purpose of, which would be very challenging for artisanal communities or others finding markets in Europe. But people advocated. So they've said only businesses which are over 250 million or whatever, they've come down to that. So I think, so that's my take on it. But definitely it's something that the light should shine on these issues. And advocacy for seeing that change with the least impact, with taking away the impact on the environment, but with the least impact on the people and their survival. I think that is the choice we have to make. And I think there was a comment, I'm not sure, where say you cannot stop consumption. And it would put a lot of people in out of, will push people even more into poverty if you stop. But making those choices, and informed choices. So here too, that is my view, that we have to actually, with commitment and determination, and of course influencing consumers, because consumers have big power. So if they know, but what have we done? I mean, like I was talking about it, I think the bigger businesses with all their capabilities, their expertise, and their strategies, they have resorted to social end and greenwashing. So we have to be going there. So anyhow, I know this was a jumble of my thoughts, but basically what I'm saying is that very radical solutions with livelihoods, it doesn't work. I don't think. That would put people in even more hardship and poverty. But environment, yes, give substitutes.
Okay.
And regulations.
Sorry.
And regulations.
And regulations. Okay. Thank you. We have a few more questions, but because of time, we will bring that session to a close. I will give each one of you just 1 minute for a closing remark. 1 minute for a closing remark. So I start with you, Joseph, and conclude with one final point. Welcome. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Pauline. And thanks also for my co-presenters, for Rupa and my confrere, Rodrigo, whom we've known ourselves for some years now. And I think I put even a question on the chat for Rupa, asking how is the fair trade, because the fair trade is a movement with beautiful principles, but we don't have the power to influence those who are promoting, especially in the area of mining. So how are we able to influence them with these principles? As Rodrigo mentioned, we are dealing with multinationals. And then the hidden agenda, I agree with you, Rodrigo, is to try to take control of our natural resources. Here in Ghana, there was an attempt even to invite a Chinese company to come and mine for 100 years. Can you imagine a contract for 100 years? Another concession for 50 years. So 50 years, all those who are signing this, and nobody will be alive. And then the next generation come in slavery. So I'm asking if we are able, this principle, to influence, for example, the London bullion gold market, other gold markets in America and all those things, because that is the way that we'll be able to at least bring some sanity into the area, because otherwise the next generation is very, very much at risk.
Yeah. So, Rodrigo, is that directed to you, to me? I think I'd let you go first. And if I have anything to add, I will.
Okay, so
because I've already answered this question in a way.
Right. Yeah, no, I just want to say that this is a big challenge. As Pope Francis talked on Laudato Si about happy sobriety and what he calls ecological conversion and the necessity of change our style of life. So I think as religious consecrated people, we have to strengthen for changes. And it's a process, as Rupa said. It's a long process. It deals with culture. But I think in other hands, we are seeing that movements and communities are striving to challenge the status quo and advocating for environmental justice and to assert the rights to protect the territories and livelihoods. They're demanding fundamental shift in power dynamics, sustainable and equitable solutions, and accountability for the harms caused by all these impacts. I would leave just two things. One is to tell you that the international organizations leading with the issue of mining on the thematic social forum will be held in an international thematic social forum in Indonesia, in Samarang, on October. And the issue is another complex one. One is the right to say no, but the other one is the so-called energy transitions. Because unfortunately, we still don't have, even with the so-called clean energy, we still don't have we're not going to have clean energy, especially because we're facing the batteries, and the batteries are made of lithium. And then we're going to have more lithium, copper, zinc, and other extractions around the world. So this is the challenge that is posed on our economic system. We're not going to think that we're going to change all cars into EVs, electric vehicles. And we don't think that 16% of the gas that is emitted that comes from the cars will be the solution. But the discussion is important to leave fossil fuels. So we need to have a lot of hope, a lot of faith, but we need to face the issue of this change. And to welcome, of course, I think there are many people here, or some, that belongs to the UN mining working group of the different congregations that deal with the issue there, and to strengthen an international level for the international body treating on human rights and business. We need to put this group of people, the enterprises, the transnational corporations, accountable for what they do. And this can be one of the instruments. Take ages, but one day.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Roderick. Sorry.
Yes, Rupa.
No, I would just say that I think continue, but really it has to become a people's movement. Here, when I talk about people, I'm talking about the people who are buying. When we talk fair trade, obviously it's about buying choices. And the movement can become stronger, like I said, if we are collaborating and being loud enough with a very clear narrative of what we want. So I think there are many movements, there are many sort of activists and protests and all, but somewhere I think that shift, I call it a paradigm shift in how we celebrate success, in how we celebrate money, in how we celebrate what is going to be the parameter of success. In Bhutan, of course, they have the index of happiness, is how they'll measure their GDP. So unless that shift happens, and then we just have to keep on with it. And it's not going to happen without taking the young people, without, I'd say, mentoring or guiding or supporting the young people who are there, who have the energy to continue. So just to sum up again, collaborations and nurturing, and not to give up. I think not to give up, because we have seen change. It may not be of the kind, to the extent that is required, but there is change. There is change. Even if the multinationals, they make those token measures, but at least that is also change. That is also change. So that's, yeah. My last words became a little long. Yeah.
No problem. No problem. So thank you. We keep, sorry, did I cut you short?
No. I was
okay.
Just thanking the other presenters, because I think it's got my mind moving. So that was
very good to end on a positive note, on a hopeful note. We don't give up. We keep the faith high, and we keep the prayer, and we keep the faith, the hope. So that's our call. And I think to go out of this webinar with this in mind, our world is richer because we live. Our world will be better because we shall do something where we can. So thank you, and I want to hand us back to Adina for closure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. We only have, how many minutes? 7 minutes left for our concluding remarks and for concluding prayer. A very rich discussion, both in the chat box as well with you, the speakers of today. We end with this event today, our one-year challenge of unfolding the ecological economics goal and its many implications. And we are grateful to all people who gave their contribution to our formation. So we can say today we know more on it, and we know there is still more to learn on ecological economics and its many, many phases. Our meeting on fair trade comes to an end, and I would like to summarize a bit what we have heard and learned today, due to you and to our distinguished guests. We have learned from Mrs. Rupa Mehta how the fair trade business model has demonstrated that it is viable and sustainable, addressing issues of social and economic inequities and climate change, and how placing people and planet before profit, fair trade calls for all businesses to transform their systems and join the cause for fair trade and climate justice. Our challenge, she said, is to promote authentic stories of social, economic, and environmental sustainability of fair trade social enterprises and grow their markets. I think this is something our Mary Ward family can do. Then Friar Joseph Blay bluntly and at the same time gently drawing our attention to how to use the use of a cell phone, a computer, or traveling by planes can make us look hypocrites when we say our attitude is an absolute no to any form of mining, keeping in mind that mining as a very ancient industry had not created damage and has not destroyed waters, lands, forests, or caused congenital malformation in mining countries such as Ghana until very recent times. We then moved to Brother Rodrigo Peret, who shared with us a deep perspective on the impact of mining in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and how the extraction of minerals and metals has destroyed and continues to destroy life and production in these territories. Human rights violations, conflict with and within affected communities, labor exploitation, deepening socio-economic inequalities, and destruction of nature are prevalent. He explained how mining is a reality where violence is a necessary condition, and how mining companies are responsible for enormous human and ecological sacrifices on all continents. Thank you all for joining us today, and a special thank you to Isabel, our interpreter, for her excellent service. We conclude our meeting with a short prayer as we continue our journey in responding in concrete ways to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. During the closing prayer, you will see some images from how our members in India, Albania, Romania are engaged in meeting the Laudato Si 7 goals. Thank you very much for joining us, and I invite you now to pray with us together. Okay. So thank you, everyone. That's all from us today. See you next year. But before we see you during the season of creation, when we will have our next online event. And sleep well for those of you who are where it's night, and have a good day to those of you who just start the day, and a good afternoon to everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Adina.
Thank you for a wonderful
Thank you very much for
Thank
everything.
you. Thank you, sisters.
Everybody
Thank you.
who have contributed. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Bye bye.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Rosa.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Wonderful meeting. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, María
Thank
Elisa.
you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Isabel.
Isabel. Muy buena traducción.
Sí, muy buena, gracias. Thank you, Rosa, for your help. I have forgotten to mention you.
No.
From behind the scenes.
No worries, no worries.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Ciao,
Ciao.
Isabel.
Ciao.
Ciao, Catalina.
Ciao, Pauline.
Ciao. Ciao, Maripaz.